For now, let's welcome to the show Sportsnet Analyst Louie DeBrusk. You heard him on the broadcast Saturday night as it was Edmonton and Vancouver. Louie, always a pleasure to welcome you back to the show. Do you ever get tired of doing things like interviewing Jake on After Hours?
No, I don't actually. No, it's always special. Don't get me wrong. You start to wonder we run out of stuff to talk about, but there's always something you can kind of figure out and chat about. But no, it's always great to see him. It's great to do games that he's involved in, and obviously great to have a conversation afterwards. And he was a pretty good trooper after a tough loss, division rival. Sometimes that's the hardest part about After Hours is getting guys away from the mentality of a game and trying to talk about some other stuff. But no, he was great. I thought he did a really good job.
From an Oilers perspective, I mean, again, it's been kind of this weird up and down under 500 start to the year, but that was not just a win, not just a blowout win, not just a big dub over a division opponent and a team you had a playoff series with last year. It was all of those things mashed into one. That feels like it could be a bit of a turning point for this team and a bit of a momentum builder for them going forward.
I agree. The way they closed out the third period, especially, I think right from the get-go for Connor McDavid goes out, draws that penalty. The power play, I feel, in that game was the best it's looked pretty much all year long. There's been a few games where it was really good, it just didn't get rewarded. But there was an urgency and a desperation on that power play. The first goal by Draisaitl, I think, set the tone for that, for the game. It wasn't a power play goal, but you can't tell me it didn't feel like one for Edmonton, and it certainly felt like one against for the Vancouver Canucks. And then in the third period, where we thought it was going to be just an absolute grind of a third period. It's a one-goal game. These two teams have played each other a lot. They understand how to play against each other. You think, okay, here we go. We're in for a pretty good third period, and it was just one team taking control of a game. And it started with that penalty drawn by Connor in the offensive zone. One of his best games, if not best games of the year, and I say that, it was his first 3-point game of the season, but I like the fact that it wasn't a forced game offensively for the Edmonton Oilers. They played great defense. They shut things down. They had that one lapse in the second period. Great timeout call by Chris Knobloch to kind of settle things down again. But from that point on, from before that and then after that, they really played the way we saw them play last year, where they just buckled down, made it hard to get chances against, and took their opportunities when they came. Some of those pucks probably shouldn't have gone in. I think they got to Lankinen just because of the number of shots they were having and the opportunities, and he's been really good for the Vancouver Canucks. But they created those breaks. And guys like Connor Brown, I know I heard you talking about him before coming in. I just think it was one of those games where they got production from a lot of different people. They closed out a game that was a hard-fought, tight game going into the third period, and they just took control of the game. A real solid win, and I agree with you. I believe it's a game that they can build on. It's a game where they say, okay, the puck hasn't been bouncing our way. It hasn't been going our way offensively. We're starting to get some production down our lineup again. Let's try and carry that forward. And, we saw some different line combinations for Edmonton again as well. Nugent Hopkins was up on the top line again after starting at center, the three-headed monster. They're shuffling some things around the back end as well, trying to find that chemistry. But, yeah, division rival, big win for Edmonton, and I think they can carry that forward.
Yeah, I mean, Oilers fans feeling great. The ones that were out in Vancouver were making a lot of noise. The offense is feeling great. They give up that goal, though, with 54 seconds left. And I mean, you're down at ice level. You see all the emotions that are going on in a hockey game. And AB, if you want to roll the clip, Stuart Skinner was not thrilled at the conclusion of this game. And I, saw some people saying like, hey, come on, like it's not about you. Your team won the game 7-3, but Skinner was no doubt upset about the penalty and the goal against at the end. Do you make anything of this? Is this a, in quote, air quotes, problem, or is this just a guy showing his emotions a bit?
It's a guy showing his emotions. He's a competitive guy. I think it's a guy that realizes that he hasn't had the start to the season that he wanted to have. A lot of expectations on Stuart Skinner this year, going to the Stanley Cup final last year. Coming in, it hasn't gone well, not just for him, but for a lot of guys on the team, it hasn't gone well. So the penalty kill is a sore spot, though. It's one of those things where they're taking on water, it seems, every game. They're giving up at least one. And, I think that is part of it as well. I think your goaltender has to be your best penalty killer. And I think for Stuart Skinner, he understands that it's still a work in progress. Even though they knew they were going to win that game, it had no bearing on the game whatsoever. I think it has a bearing on your psyche a little bit, where you're like, yeah, those are the kind of goals we're giving up, and we need to stop giving up those kind of goals. So I don't think he was calling anybody out. I think it was more on himself. He wants to stop every single puck. That was a pretty tough one. I think he had to respect Pettersson, who made a no-look pass over to Suter. It wasn't a real easy save. But that's how I'm reading into it anyway. I'm looking at that as just a guy that's competitive, that understands that his game needs to be better, that the team's game needs to be better. And Stuart is not a guy that really wears his emotions on his sleeves too much. He's very in check. But every once in a while, it's going to boil over. And this guy wants to dig in and be better. So take the win and then build forward. But no question, that's an area they have to get better at, is the penalty kill.
Yeah, the penalty kill has been hot garbage so far this season. And it's weird because they won 7-3, so I hate asking back-to-back, call them negative questions. But I wanted to talk a bit about Evan Bouchard, because since the last time we talked, there was that really tough game for him against the Vegas Golden Knights, where a couple of those goals off the rush were not, called him a great look for Bouch. And listen, he's never going to be a guy who's A++ in his own end, but at least last year it was like, hey, if you're dealing with a couple of negatives in the D zone, because every game he's doing 6 or 7 positive things on the other side of the ice. And right now it just feels like he's in this malaise, like nothing's really clicking for Bouch. What are you seeing in his game that's lacking right now?
I'm seeing a guy in a contract year. I'm seeing a guy with a lot of talk around him about a big deal. And how many times have we seen this with players where it's impossible for it not to creep into your mind? I'm sorry. And I think it's crept into Evan Bouchard's mind. But I'll also go back to last year. I'll go back to 2 years ago. Sometimes Evan Bouchard takes a little time to get going in the season. There's no question when he's playing at the top of his game, one of the elite offensive defensemen in the league. I think we can just stop right there and all agree on that one. He's led the playoffs twice in defensive scoring. So this is a guy in the biggest moments of the year, when it matters the most, has stepped up and been great. He's led as a defenseman in points in the 3 years ago, and last year going to the Stanley Cup final. So I'm not worried about the offensive part. I think it'll come. The defensive side of the game, though, for me, I think it all goes hand in hand with him. And when he's not assertive with the puck, when he doesn't have that confidence, say, offensively with the puck, and the puck isn't going in for him, and he's not making those passes, I think it trickles into the defensive game. It's all about moving his feet. I think on the one goal where he was standing still also, it was a pretty good battle won along the wall. And I think at that stage of the game for Edmonton, they were pushing. And when Edmonton gets pushing, and we've seen it all year long, when they start to get pushing and they start to force, and that's what I was talking about with Vancouver, I never saw that. I saw a team that stayed completely within their capacity to defend, but took their opportunities when they came, drew their penalties in the offensive zone off the cycle, and found a way to win a hockey game against a team that's had their number, by the way, in the regular season anyway, and had a 3-2 lead in the playoff series last year they played against. But for Bouchard, it all goes hand in hand. I think it all meshes together. When he's feeling it offensively, his overall game elevates, and right now the puck hasn't been going in for him. He's been hitting a lot of shin pads, which we've seen him do before. So it's just a matter of him getting his game rounded about, and there's no question he has to. It hasn't been a great start for him. I think the contract, no question about it, is certainly lingering and starting to play on his mind a bit. I've seen this with players the entire time that I've covered the National Hockey League as a broadcaster. You see guys go into a contract year. It goes one way or the other. Either they take off and they absolutely knock it out of the park, or else they struggle because it's on their mind. And everybody like us wants to talk about it and goes, okay, what's the number? Where's it going to be? How long of a contract is it going to be? This is all things that you hear the players say, I'm just going to block it out and go play. It's not that easy.
Yeah, it really isn't. Maybe they got to get him on a Zoom call with Sam Reinhart. That's a guy who probably made himself an extra 30 mil last year.
David Pastrnak scored 60 in his contract year. So, listen, it happens. There's players that go and do wonderful things in their contract year. But I think there's also times when you don't get off to a great start, you start to think about it a little bit. And, for Evan, he's a great defenseman. When he's playing at the top of his game, all you do is compliment the things that he does, not just offensively, but defensively. He's really turned himself into a complete defenseman. He's struggling right now. He's struggling to kind of find that consistency in his game. He's not alone, though. And I don't want to just pick out Evan Bouchard. Obviously being a defenseman, obviously being a guy that moves the puck and makes plays under pressure on the line, when he makes a mistake, it's glaring, and that's part of being a defenseman.
Yeah, and there is that too. Like, I think back to last year, there were so many moments where he would be dancing at the blue line and he'd do that little tight toe drag. And in the moment, you're like, what are you doing? And then he makes the play. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's what makes Evan Bouchard so special. And that's a great point by you. Like, if he's not 100%, that little toe drag turns into an odd man rush. That little extra jump up can turn into a 2-on-1. So it is apparent. One other guy I wanted to ask you about, or I guess it's kind of two guys, but we've now gotten a full month of viewing Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson in their Oilers threads. And the two of them have kind of crisscrossed a little bit. In the first kind of call it 6-7 games, Arvidsson was a little snake bit couldn't get going. Jeff Skinner was scoring, shooting the puck more than any player on the Oilers roster. And now over the last kind of couple games, Jeff Skinner's, I don't know if it's fair to say he's worked himself in the doghouse, but he's gone from the first line to he ended last game on the fourth line. What is it with Skinner that isn't clicking right now? And maybe what did we see early in the year that was making him effective? Are there any like little things that you're noticing in him that have caused this, call it, slip up?
I would tell you that being a scorer throughout his career, he's going to be a streaky guy. There's going to be good times and bad times. I think every scorer is like that. There's very few guys in the National Hockey League that are just consistently good the whole year long in scoring goals. They just aren't. This is a tough league to score goals in. When you're a goal scorer, you're getting keyed on. For Jeff Skinner, for me, the thing that I noticed early on that maybe I'm not noticing as much now, so this would be the one thing that stands out for me, he was around it. Similar to Corey Perry. Corey Perry is around it every game. Jeff Skinner, for me, really impressed me with the fact that for a guy that's not that big, he was in the trenches. He was in the blue paint. He was making plays around the net. He was getting his opportunities, getting those high-quality chances against because of his skill set. Really good hands around the net. And I think that's where he needs to go a little bit more. I don't necessarily think that he's even said it on the after hours when we had him, Scott Oak and I, he does score some goals from distance. He does have a good shot, but he even said he scores a lot of his goals around the net. So go get dirty. Go find those dirty areas. Go to the front of the net. Be a Zach Hyman-like mentality. And with his good skill set and hands, he'll finish some plays in there. But it's not happening as much. And you're right. He's in a little bit of a stretch here where he's jumped around on different lines. That can be difficult as well. A new guy trying to find chemistry hasn't really clicked, where you just say to yourself, you have to keep him on that line. And I think Victor Arvidsson, who we also were talking about, had a little bit of that as well. Some pressure playing up on the line with Draisaitl. You get moved around a little bit. You're back there again. You revisit it, and you hope that it takes off and it becomes that thing. He scored a big goal the other night. So I think for Skinner, though, it's one of those things where when he starts to go to the dirty areas and you start to see him in those little scrums, little cross-checking, little pushing and shoving around the net, which I didn't really know that much about him as far as that was concerned. I always knew he was a talented player. He always found a way to score goals. But his bread and butter, again, is around the net. So go to the net if you want to score goals.
And hey, the nice thing about the way this Oilers team is constructed is the fact that when a guy like Skinner isn't producing and you need to move him down for a little bit, they have plenty of candidates that can move up in the lineup. Yeah. I know the chat today was saying I was too hard on Matthias Janmark for his turnover on the Hronek goal, but even they move him up to the third line. What does he do? Has a 3-assist game. Like, they have enough pieces that they can move guys from the fourth line to the second line. Corey Perry's a guy they can move up and down a little bit. Like, you do, as much as we talk about, and maybe I even make too big of a deal over who's playing with who on any given night, it's an 82-game season. Like, guys are going to go through funks. And if you have the depth that the Oilers do, where you can take a Perry or a Janmark, move them up for a couple games, they'll give you what you need, and you wait for someone else to kind of find their footing again. That's what can make this team so dangerous.
And I think, obviously to magnify that at the start of the year, they weren't winning. And they were finding ways to lose games. So when that's happening, and then you're still trying to figure out certain individuals and where they fit, guys are trying to figure out their own game respectively, it starts to take on a little bit more of a life. And I think that's where the negativity always comes in, is if you're not winning and then you're shuffling and not finding that chemistry, it's like, okay, what's going on here? Why is this not happening? But I think as this goes, you're right. It is a very long season. I think you're going to see some different combinations. I know that they've tried Nugent Hopkins in the three-hole a couple of times to start. He went back up on that line to start the third period there. And I mean, that was the turning point in the game for me. Drawing that penalty, scoring that power play goal, there was no looking back after that for Edmonton. So, and I think that the power play, it was the power play unit saying, hey, we're kind of sick and tired of people telling us our power play isn't any good anymore. Let's start making this work. And it seemed like the details were there. The execution was there. And for me, when that power play with the skill they have starts to be determined, win more 50-50 battles than not, they're going to put the puck in the net. It's only a matter of time. They were really good. And I think that set the tone for the whole game, the first goal, like I said. But again, I really do believe that negativity comes from losing. When you're losing and things aren't working, you start to pick apart different things, and that's just the nature of the beast. That's what this game is all about. It is about winning. It's about getting better. It's about the process. And I think that we've seen some guys struggle at times throughout this year. You need to have that production down your lineup when your big guns aren't necessarily coming out of the gates on fire. I mean, Draisaitl, was starting to work his way in. Obviously, when Connor went down, he ratcheted his game up. And I know you said it last time we talked, that could have been a positive for the team to have him kind of take that weight on his shoulders, get his game going. Connor comes back, has his first 3-point game. And, like I said, it wasn't a game. He was skating and he was carrying the puck, but I really felt he was hard checking. I felt he was just in the right position at the right time. He did it the right way. And when the team plays that way, we saw it all last year, the year before, when they start to buckle down and play tight hockey where they wait for their chances the right way, they're a really hard team to beat. So I think it's just a matter of everything clicking. It was a game where you got that production, though, and I think that's important to find some confidence down your lineup.
Last one, it's a bit of an off-ice story, I guess, but a lot of news or a lot of conversation about Dante Fabro, who was put on waivers. We saw him once this year. He was healthy scratched in the second meeting between the Oilers and Predators, but I mean, it's kind of a moot point because he didn't even make it to the Oilers on the waiver order. Columbus scooped him up. But from what you've seen of Fabro, would you have made a claim on him if you were the Oilers? Is that the kind of defenseman you think they need?
He checks a lot of the boxes, right? Age, right-handed shot, playing with Roman Josi, so he's obviously played with a high-quality defenseman. He's probably learned a lot. I think he's gone like this throughout his career. So yes, to answer your question, that is a guy you take a flyer on. I think that's a guy you certainly go out and say, okay, maybe if you bring him in, give him a different type of ice time or a different look from a different situation. A lot of pressure stepping up and playing that top pairing with Roman Josi in Nashville. So yeah, I would definitely give him an opportunity. I see a guy, again, that's young, that has come up in a real hard system to play. And when sometimes you get a different look in a different team, you start to put it together. He has put it together in portions of his career. There's no question. He's been a real solid defenseman at times. So obviously struggled a little bit this year, was a healthy scratch, like you said, was on the outside looking in. A change might be the best thing for him. And I agree with you. He would be a guy that I would definitely take a flyer on.
Yeah, I was really hoping that some of the bottom feeders wouldn't have put in a claim because again, to get that guy for nothing but his cap, it would have been interesting. Louie, always a pleasure. Thanks for doing this and enjoy the games this week.
All right. Yeah, I knew he wasn't going to make it through. There's no way that guy was not going claimed. He was going to get claimed. But yeah, for sure. Take care. Some big ones coming up this week for Edmonton.
There you go. And you'll hear Louie DeBrusk on the call. Always a pleasure to welcome Louie to the show on a Monday. 3 games for the Oilers this week. They kick things off tomorrow with a matchup against the New York Islanders. What's up, Nation citizens? If you like that video, then you need to be subscribed to the Oilers Nation YouTube. Podcasts, live shows, exclusive interviews, and analysis. Everything you need from your favorite voices at Oilers Nation. And you don't want to miss any of it, so hammer that subscribe button.